Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We'll give a couple moments to allow people to join. Inshallah, we'll be beginning very, very shortly, inshallah. Okay, we'll begin now. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط. O you who believe, stand firmly to establish justice. Chapter 4, verse 135. Respected guests and honored panelists, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. My name is Mahdi Dhiyauddin, and it is with my great honor and pleasure to be able to moderate tonight's fantastic webinar alongside my dear cousin, Sayyid Muhammad Sadiq Al-Qazwini. This program is brought to you with the help of tireless volunteers and truly an inspiring collaboration of youth groups, including Mount San Antonio College MSA in California, Muslim Youth in Motion in Vancouver, Canada, Muslim Youth Connection in Michigan, Islamic Educational Center of Orange County in California, and last but not least, the Universal Muslim Association of America, better known as Ummah. Because I live in Vancouver, I would like to acknowledge that the land that we are on is the unceded traditional territory of the Katsi, Simiyamu, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish peoples. We have a truly beneficial program in store for you all, with the topic of the proceedings being Becoming an Ally, the next step for the Muslim community. I'd like to jump right into the program, and we'll begin with the recitation of the Holy Quran by my dear friend and Qari, Mustafa Jum'ah, who will share some verses of the Holy Book with his fantastic voice. Assalamu alaikum, brother Mustafa. The floor is yours to begin.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أحسنت.
Ahsant, Brother Mustafa. Barakallah bik. Thank you for this wonderful recitation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. My name is Muhammad Sadiq al-Qazwini, and I'm honored to moderate this event along with my dear cousin, Sayyid Mahdi Ziya-ud-Din. The Black community has been suffering from systemic racism for the past 400 years. Black people live in constant fear of racial violence and face anti-Black prejudice on a daily basis. We live in the 21st century, yet Black people are being murdered and brutalized by the police with near impunity. The gruesome killing of George Floyd has reminded us of the violent mistreatment and dehumanization Black people face on a day-to-day basis. As Muslims, we have a responsibility towards the Black community. As Sayyid Mahdi mentioned, the Quran orders us to always stand for justice. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada'a lillah walau ala anfusikum aw al-walidaini wal aqrabin. O you who believe, be steadfast maintainers of justice, witnesses for God, though it be against yourselves or your parents and kinsfolk. However, we, the Muslim community, have constantly overlooked our Black brothers and sisters. Most of us aren't aware or tend to forget that the Black community, the Black Muslims, comprise 25% of the Muslim population in the United States. It means that at least 1 in 4 Muslims in the United States fear of being murdered by the police. So we must understand that these issues are issues that our Muslim brothers and sisters are facing. We have a responsibility towards our Black brothers and sisters to maintain justice and stand against the current institutionalized racism that they face. Therefore, the objective and to propose practical steps needed to work toward overcoming discrimination against the Black community. Our questions to our honorable speakers today are divided into 3 categories. Our first category is the embedded racism within the Muslim community. Second, the history and experience of the Black Muslim community. And lastly, and most importantly, the next steps we can take to overcome this discrimination. Each category will have 2 questions, and each speaker will be addressing each question in 5 minutes for the purpose of getting through the event. We also aim to have a quick Q&A discussion. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. Sayyid Mahdi and I will be addressing the questions on your behalf.
Now it is my honor to introduce one of the speakers for today. Imam Jihad Safir is the current president and director of Islah LA, a nonprofit dedicated to conducting social services in South Los Angeles. His work as a young prison chaplain instilled a desire in him to disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline, and he founded the Islah Academy. Imam Safir received his BA in Arabic Studies and his Master's in Islamic Leadership in 2013, and currently is pursuing his PhD in Practical Theology with a concentration in Religious Education at Claremont School of Theology. Imam Safir became the resident Imam of Masjid Ibadullah in 2008, succeeding his great father, Imam Sadiq Safir. He's also the former Imam of Masjid al-Taqwa in Altadena, the former youth director of the Islamic Center of Glendale, and the former Muslim chaplain at the California Institution for Women. Imam Safir has received many honorary awards for his philanthropy and is a true role model for everyone around him and someone I especially admire.
Thank you for that introduction, Sayyid Mahdi. And now we will be introducing our second speaker, Margaret Hill from Muslim Arc. Margaret Aziza Hill is an adjunct professor, blogger, editor, and freelance writer. She's the co-founder and executive director of Muslim Arc, the Muslim Anti-Racist Collaborative, an organization focusing on education for liberation. After converting to Islam in 1993, her life experiences as a Black American woman have informed her research and writing on Islam, education, race, and gender. She has nearly a decade of teaching experiences at all levels from elementary, secondary, college level to adult education. She has worked in education at various capacities, including as a substitute teacher, instructor, curriculum design, and school policy teacher training, as well as teaching assistant and teaching fellow. She's earned her bachelor's degree in history from Santa Clara University in 2003 and master's in history of the Middle East and Islamic Africa from Stanford University in 2006. She has given talks and lectures in various universities and community centers throughout the country.
And last but not least, the great Imam Walid. It's my pleasure to introduce him. Imam Dawood Walid is currently the executive director of the Michigan chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, better known as CARE. Imam Walid is regularly interviewed and quoted by major news outlets, included in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, BBC, and Fox News. Imam Walid has lectured at prestigious educational institutions about Islam, interfaith dialogue, and social justice, including at Harvard University, DePaul University, and the University of the Virgin Islands. He was also given testimony at hearings and briefings in US Congress, and Imam Walid has also studied the disciplines of Arabic grammar and morphology, foundations of Islamic jurisprudence, sciences of the exegesis of the Quran, and early Islamic history. Imam Walid served in the United States Navy under honorable conditions, earning 2 United States Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medals while deployed abroad. He has also received awards of recognition from the City Council of Detroit and from the Mayor of Lansing, as well as a number of other religious and community organizations. Now we will segue into and jump right into the questions, inshallah, with the first category being embedded racism. And my dear cousin will ask the first question.
Thank you so much, Sayyid Mehdi. Our first question will be directed to all speakers, but first we were looking for an answer from Imam Dawood Walid. The first question is, what are some examples of manifest and latent acts of discrimination against the Black community? In other words, what are some of the obvious and hidden forms of racial discrimination within the Muslim community?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين ورضوان الله تعالى على صحابته الراشدين والتابعين لهم بخير وإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وبعد. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this platform for this important discussion, along with Imam Jihad and Sister Marguerite, who both I've been watching have been extremely busy during this time in particular. May Allah reward both of them and preserve both of them. There are a number of different manifestations that come across. Some of them are individual acts of disrespect. Some of them are institutional inside of our Islamic organizations, and some of those are subtle. And I have 5 minutes for this answer, and I think I ate up 2 minutes already, so I'll be very quick. Metro Detroit is the most concentrated area of Muslims in the United States of America, right? We have a metropolitan area of about 300,000 Muslims. And with a small population, this is like the most Muslim place in America. And then at the same time, it's also the largest percentage of Arabs, some say outside of the so-called Middle East, right? And so I remember about 7 years ago or so, some of you are familiar with this, but I got sick and tired of just going into stores or going to places and hearing Arab call Black people Abid, right? So I wrote an article about that in the Arab American News, and we started talking about that, and I got a few of our imams to address it, and then later on, Muslim Arc started a campaign about drop the A word. But that's like one of the manifestations when you go into a store, like in Hamtramck, Michigan, and you walk in the store and you hear a Yemeni guy say, "Under hada abd," right? Like, look at that slave. Watch out for that slave right there, as if someone Black might steal something, right? And then some of us who are Black and know Arabic, then we know not to go in that store anymore, right? But that's some of the things. The other thing is that many of our Islamic centers are really cultural centers masquerading as masajid. What do I mean by that? Is that people pray there, but when you look at actually who has input in the programming, who's actually on the board of directors, right? And then you have people who are Black folks who pray in there and will never have a chance to have any input on the programming of what goes on, except maybe the symbolic token Black History Month program where they try to call me in or another imam or a sister to come and give the we got to give the Malcolm X speech once a year in February, right around the time of his martyrdom. So that's par for the course. I think the other thing is, and I want to be, it's very brief because I know that The majority of people who are watching this are from the Ithna Ashari school of thought, the Shia school of thought. And I'll say that even like a more subtle way of racism is the erasure of Blackness as it relates to Ahlul Bayt. So when you're like around Dearborn, you see pictures of the 12 Imams, and they all look like Persians. And we know that the mother of Musa al-Kadhim was an African woman. He was described as being Black. And we know the mother of Imam Muhammad al-Jawad was an African woman, and he was Black, right? And we know that these Imams look more like me than they look like anyone from Tehran or Qum, right? But then you see how they're depicted. And it's almost like the white Jesus in Christianity, right? And it breeds a type of subtle superiority complex in some. And then people come into Islam and see these things. It's almost like what you traded the white Jesus for the white Imams, right? So I mean, I think I probably need to start a campaign about that in Dearborn for next Muharram of getting those pictures banned all through the west side of Detroit and in Dearborn, because it's frankly it's not accurate according to history, right? And that's number one. So we should be truthful for the sake of truth, right? And then it's disrespectful. I don't know how any other way I can put it. So with that, I'll stop, and I'm curious to hear what our beloved sister Marguerite has to say, as well as Imam Jihad. Afwan minkum.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing answer. Inshallah, it's true. It's very true that even in the Shia school of thought, there's a lot of embedded racism, and even though they might think it's subtle, it's actually it's very obvious. Sister Marguerite, we'd love to hear for you. If you'd like me to repeat the question, I could also do that as well.
So when thinking about some of the explicit forms of racism, right, and kind of continuing from the stores, like this can be housing discrimination, right, job discrimination, and this is even global when Black Muslims go and apply for jobs in different places, like and they tell people like, oh, sign non-disclosure agreements, but you'll see when you actually talk about that, like fair wages, that Black educators, regardless of what their degrees, are typically paid less than white Muslims. You'll see hierarchies within school leadership. So that was like when my first entry point, and really outside of doing research on race from 2004 to 2009, when I was studying racial formation in the Middle East. And so, but like within the American context, like my entry point was in Islamic schools. And so you'll have these hierarchies where maybe the school leadership, the principal will be a white man, but then the teachers are Black teachers, and they don't necessarily get the same amount of respect as other educators in that school. So that, and given like how widespread our Islamic schools are, and when you think about the credentialing, whether you have credentialed African-American scholars, the kind of questioning that happens. So there's microaggressions that do occur. For example, questioning, being shocked that there are Black Muslims that can recite Quran, and getting grilled on that. True experience happened to me. Like there's stores I stopped going to in Philadelphia because I did not want to go and buy a Quran and be subjected to microaggressions or questions about whether I could recite when I had specifically asked for a particular like warsh reading of that Quran. Just the questioning of the leadership of Black Muslims and their capabilities, that is pretty widespread when you start to interview and talk with people, like whether they're imams and going ahead and leading prayer. And then some people will correct them on their recitation, even if their recitation was spot on, but there's a presumed incompetence. So those are the kind of structural things that we could see in Islamic schools, but then what happens within faith spaces. And that also extends to social dynamics where you have, segregation that occurs. And some of this even within multiracial communities where certain people will get invited to homes for whether they're celebrating an Eid, the Eid open houses, who gets invited to that? you know, like some of the like private party iftars. And I've even seen with married couples where a Black woman was married to a white passing Latino, and he would get all the invites to the iftars and she would get not one through the Ramadan. And so anti-Blackness and misogyny are like very much directed at Black women. You know, even, you know, people would make negative comments about people's wives who are Black, whether the man was Black or not. You know, like you would have that happen in a community where people would just really assume like, why would you marry her when you are so famous? You could have anybody else. So those are kind of like, I guess, 3 dimensions of how racism and anti-Blackness can show up. And I would say that it's also global. I lived in Kuwait, and, you know, some of that was the first time that I was called a slave, was in Kuwait. And then it happened again in my Islamic school, where my own students called us, many of the Black teachers, in the store as we were purchasing. The first time I heard it was from my own student.
Thank you for that answer, Sister Margery. I know Black women suffer especially because they have an extra layer of it's called intersectionality in sociology, and they just suffer from an extra layer of suffering because of their gender, and this is absolutely unacceptable by a community that claims to be the best community in history, and a community that follows the guidelines of the Quran and the Prophet. Imam Jihad Safir, we would love to hear your answer for this question, and I'll just repeat it one more time for to remind the audience for this question, which is, what are some examples of manifest and latent acts of discrimination against the Black community? In other words, what are some of the obvious and hidden forms of racial discrimination within the Muslim community?
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. First of all, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I want to say that it's a pleasure to be on this panel, especially with these esteemed guests. You know, my Imam Dawood, and my good sister, who has been really educating us on anti-Black racism, Sister Margery. And I think it's important for us to really have these very honest, open, candid conversations. And, you know, for me, it stems in regards to a failure of the Muslim community to really get to learn each other's stories. You know, it's important that we're part of a society that there's a judgment there without getting to learn someone's story, without getting to know someone's story. You know, I've heard time in and time out how a brother or sister were going to the masjid, and immediately someone who is non-African American wants to teach the African American. They assume that the African American does not know. So that the times that I've heard, for example, an African American sister performing her salah, and someone moves her hands. Or someone, for example, going into the masjid, and immediately, instead of sitting down and getting to know someone's name, getting to know someone, which city they're from, getting to know about someone's history, immediately they want to cover the sister's neck, okay? They want to tell the brother that his tattoos are haram, right? Instead of a failure to to learn and get to know someone's story, that this person is a living human document, and you need to learn about their chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 in their book. And this is for us, you know, Islamically, one of the rulings of when we want to really give someone nasiha about a ruling, you have to know the ruling first, but also you need to know if it's going to be a benefit or not. You know, the countless amount of times that we've turned people off from coming into the masjid, African American brothers and sisters, because we're trying to teach them instead of getting to know who we are dealing with. And I think what happens is, it's a failure, which this is from a broader narrative, living in United States of America, which at the inception of the United States of America failed to recognize the full humanity of African American people. And I think we end up adopting attitudes that are surrounding our masajid, right? So one of the things that I want to emphasize is that, you know, we need to stop as a Muslim community trying to make Black people into our clones, you know? So, for example, why does one of my good friends, why does he have an accent? And he's from the hood. You know what I'm saying? Ain't no need for an accent, but what happens to him, he is victimized by people trying to make him clones instead of accepting him for him, all right? And what happens is that as a Muslim community, sometimes we're ashamed of those who have accepted Islam. I'm ashamed of this brother with tattoos, all right? I'm ashamed of him and I want him to be closer to me. I'm the standard of Islam in America. And I want my brother has tattoos. He needs to immediately get rid of those tattoos and grow his beard out. I want him to look like me instead of accepting him for who he is and realizing that he comes in with a story and a narrative that I need to learn to appreciate. And if I heard his narrative, that what he had to go through in order to get into the masjid, I would appreciate and I would love him for who he is. And I wouldn't try to make him into a master of the Arabic language overnight. So instead of correcting him, I'm going to be considerate of him and get to know, first of all, who he is, get his number, meet up with him, talk to him, get to know him, make him a part of my family and love and embrace him first before trying to teach him on who he ought to be and appreciate who he is and how he has really turned away from the things that call him away from the deen. He's defied them, he's went past them, and he's up in here with me praying salat. So I think that's one of my biggest issues. I think there was so much said by Imam Dawood and also our sister Margaret. They said so many things. We can delve into more. My issue is that not appreciating each other for who we are. And I don't want to come into an environment where I'm not appreciated. I'm being corrected for how I speak. I'm being corrected constantly for how I pronounce things in the Arabic language, but no one's taking time to get to know me. And in closing, I would say that my time working in the prison system, I'll never forget telling there's a young lady who was incarcerated. She had left and she ended up coming back into prison. She was released and ended up coming back in. And I told her, what happened? Why are you back here? What happened? And she said, well, I was out for a while. She said, I went to the masjid. No one embraced me.
Wow.
No one took hold of my hand. Okay. No one got to know me. So I went to the streets where they embraced me and they loved me. And now I'm back here. So these are some of my issues. And I think this is spurred by racism, us being afraid to get to know each other and wanting to only teach each other.
Ahsan, that's a spectacular response, Imam Safir. We're going to move on to the next question, and it's Muslim communities either ignore or in the rare case overcompensate the presence of Black Muslims in their communities. I know the dear Jihad Saleh is also in presence, and he told us a story about how sometimes they're ignored, but sometimes they're even compensated where the Muslim community doesn't even find the balance, and sometimes they make them feel like guests instead of communal members. So how can the Muslim community find this balance between forcing them either to be outsiders or on the other extreme where they feel like guests, and instead make them feel like they are actually part of the community? And I'd love to start with Imam Walid, if that's okay.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. SubhanAllah, like 30 something, I've never experienced that. So maybe that's for somebody else. I literally have never experienced what you just. Oh, well, we have some, we're being bombed right now in the chat, subhanAllah.
I'll deal with it right now.
That's a real miserable person. They're like, that's so sad for them.
May Allah guide you. May Allah guide you. Whoever you are, may Allah guide you to Islam and take the ignorance out of your heart. May He guide you. I got Zoom bombed speaking on a manor program. I got bombed. So alhamdulillah, it's all good. Anyway, I'm not going to take up my whole time with this. I think this is better for Sister Marguerite and Imam Jihad to say, but the overcompensation, I just think very briefly, would be corrected if you treated and saw someone who's Muslim and Black just like someone in your own family or like from your own village, right? I mean, you know, that you should just be natural and not like try to have like awkward overcompensation. This is your brother, this is your sister in Islam. I'm not talking about any colorblind stuff either. I don't believe in that whole colorblind narrative either. But I can't think of one time where I've walked into a masjid and someone overcompensated and was like overly hospitable. Now I've walked into masajid like what Imam Jihad said, and someone tries to teach me how to make wudu, not knowing I'm the khatib that day. So they're trying to teach me how to make wudu or ask me what my name is. Brother, do you know what your name is? I mean, do you know what it means? I literally had that happen, right? What's your name, Dawood? Oh, do you know what it means? I was like, no, tell me. Then I walk up on the minbar and say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, inna alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So that's happened to me before, but I will cede my time for Sister Amagri and Imam Jihad for that one.
Thank you for that answer. And unfortunately, this is just an unfortunate reality within the Muslim community. And thank you for being here just to address these issues. And inshallah, the audience and myself and Sayyid Mahdi will have a better understanding of some of your experiences and what we can do to overcome this discrimination. So Imam Jihad, if we can go to you and have your answer for this question, please.
Yeah, I think Bismillah. So I've been a part of instances, for example, I'll never forget. And by the way, you know, for myself, and I'm sure Imam Dawood, he can say this. I mean, I'm going to speak for myself. I have Imam Privilege. So when I go in with my title. I go in with people previously having a memory of one of my speeches or so on, and I go in with privilege. A lot of times I get a lot of stories from the people that travel with me, the people that go to these different locations with me. How, you know, one of my brothers said, I don't never want to come back to this location again, how they treated me, you know. And I was oblivious to it because I have Imam Privilege walking into the same location. But I have been a part of instances, for example, people maybe, you know, like you said, this overcompensation or being almost patronizing, where they sit me down and then I have to hear about a racialized joke, right? And I have to listen to this joke, highly offended. But for myself, I'm more shy than, you know, say, for example, some of my brothers and sisters, they'll be straight up and say, and go off on somebody. Myself, I'm patient, you know, I'll listen to somebody and I'll have to sit through, you know, jokes. And I think that it's important for our brothers and sisters, and what I've seen work wonders is when you have these shura, or you have these circles where people, they're able to become vulnerable. These are deliberate circles that you set up, and you know, people are able to become vulnerable. This is what we want to do, inshallah, you know, for some future workshops, is we want to bring people from different backgrounds together to listen to each other's story. And we have to build more empathy towards each other, more compassion towards each other. And one thing that I would advise is that we need to learn to listen to each other a lot more than we're trying to tell our story, but learn to listen. What we have in the Muslim community is people trying to say what they think is best for the African-American people. Why don't you listen to see what how the African-Americans can advise you on what is best, right? Oh, we need to do this campaign. And this is what we've done. Like in California, we told them, hey, in California, allow African-Americans, this is our struggle. So allow us to lead in this. Take our advice in this. No longer telling us how we're supposed to feel, how we're supposed to deal with racism. Well, the Prophet ﷺ said, or it says in the Quran, no, on this one, you have to learn and listen to individuals who are insiders who have been victimized by some of these things. So I think that it's important for us to get together and learn each other's sensitivities. And that means we have to listen to each other, how each other wants to be treated, instead of assuming they're gonna like this joke when I tell them this racist joke.
Thank you so much. Sister Margaret, would you like to add anything for this question?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd like to address the overcompensation, right? Like the ways that people will, like the instrumentality of Blackness, or just being kind of invited to perform or to do work, and that's just the pure nature of the relationship, is like either like transactional, and I've seen that a lot, as far as when people are invited socially, you know, and I can make that contrast. Like, I mean, I have a picture of the Bay. This is the Bay Bridge. And so like, there's people that I've known for many years, long before I went into a Stanford. I was a traditional, like I was a non-traditional student. So it took me about 10 years to finish my undergrad. But I had friends who went to some of those like elite schools, even Stanford, and, you know, and like when I didn't have any degrees, and they liked me because of my goofy personality and that I was talkative. And so those are the friends that I still have, like I'm still in contact with, right? Like those are the friends that actually paved the way for me and inspired me to go on and get my degree. And then, you know, that contrasts in other spaces where people may appreciate the work that I do, but that's the sole basis of that. It's being, you know, like during the COVID crisis, of having people that would ask me to do certain things or ask me advice, but not once ask me when they were texting me, "Assalamu alaikum, are you okay? How are you doing?" You know, not even that question, but immediately seeking some advice so they could go back and weigh in as an expert on an issue around race. And so, you know, I think that we have to be mindful, right, of that history of exploitation of Black labor and the expectation that Black people are, you know, and for those who go old school, you watch The Message, right, Bilal, and he had that rock on his chest, right? And it's just like, he was like, you know, like, and it's just like, you know, that we're supposed to perform that struggle and inspire people. And it's sort of a different relationship that, you know, the ways that people may kind of objectify whiteness and white converts, but it's like that it's like the instrumentality of like Black struggle and to perform that publicly. So I think it's, you know, like what we do need to do is what Imam Jihad Sofia said, is like, you have to get to know each other's real stories. Being in organizing spaces and Muslim organizing spaces where we've shared authentic stories and learned about people's family trauma and found comparisons. My family having to go on a northern migration, right? Being displaced multiple times and what we lost in that. And how does that connect to people who were displaced by war, and that we could find a commonality, right, around our struggle, and that we could forge a new future based on that. But if we're not listening to each other's stories, if I'm not hearing or understanding the trauma that they're going through and that they're struggling with, then even as I may react to the narratives that they've absorbed, like the anti-Black narratives, and then they're just spewing it out because like they don't know, they haven't been taught cultural sensitivity or how important that is, then, you know, I may treat them as an entire other, right? And bring all that trauma that I have, you know, 44 years of racism. My first experience of racism was 4 years old. And so, you know, like I think it is really important that we work to build those bridges, but we have to do it within a kind of framework that doesn't perpetuate harm, that doesn't have us either perform that emotional labor and is not confessional. Honestly, like when I meet a person, I don't want to hear the latest or just be like, I'm just surprised. Like people tell me news stories of some anti-Black thing that their relative said. That's not going to build a relationship with me. That's not an authentic engagement. I mean, yes, you may be disgusted by that. I'm not sharing Islamophobic, anti-Arab racism. The people in my family, I have family members of all races, you know, even Trump supporters that are white, and they say terrible things about Muslims of all races, but I'm not going to share that and re-traumatize people. So I think it's like we have to think about how we're going to be in community together and be really committed and not just invite people to our spaces to work. Sometimes I just want to go and learn and not just enjoy and to be able to talk and not be invited just to do something. And you know, like it is definitely a challenge when those social relationships, especially now that I've relocated to another region and not having the same type of social network. And how do you really build that when people just kind of may see Black Muslims as like, oh, can you speak? Can you sing? Maybe you can do the adhan, you know? So we have to get beyond that performance to actually just really getting to know each other and valuing each other, no matter what rate, you know, because like classism, like all that combines. But, you know, like I should have to go to Stanford to get respect from the Muslim community. And so, you know, and I've seen the change or the shift. And I think that that's something that we have to address, you know, as we try to build authentic relationships and welcome people, you know, especially if we want to welcome a quarter of the American Muslim population into our centers.
Thank you for that answer, Sister Margaret. And it was an excellent point that you brought up, that we have to listen and also be sensitive towards other, and not just use stories that we've heard just to try to relate and not be authentic. And that's a really excellent point, which brings us to our second category of today's discussion, which is the Black American Muslim community. And we would like to shed light upon it because, as we all know, we need to listen. We genuinely need to listen to your experiences, to your hardships, and understand, because there's a lack of understanding from the Muslim community's behalf and from my behalf as well. And I genuinely want to listen from your experiences. So the first question we'd like to hear from Imam Dawood Walid first, which is, what is important to know about the history of Black community in general and the Black Muslim community specifically? And what are some resources that you can recommend to all of us to read or listen to?
Well, one thing I like to start off with is that Muslims who are Black are not monolithic, right? We're not monolithic as far as how we interpret Islam. We're not all converts. We have different levels of education and socioeconomic backgrounds. Like, you know, all of us don't live in inner cities. Many of us do. Most of us didn't convert to Islam in prison, though a significant percentage of us have, right? So I think that there's more than reading books, I would say, is that it is incumbent upon Muslims who are not Black to go to where Muslims are who are Black and actually gain some experiential knowledge and go back to what Imam Jihad says and hear stories, right? Because a lot of these things, these oral narratives, aren't in books. I mean, for instance, I know that Imam Jihad comes from a lineage and a background of Muslims. Like, he's not a convert. My children are fourth generation African-American Muslims, right? So there's many stories that could be told. There's another thing that I would have to say too, is that our history as Muslims in America being Black did not start with the experience of us being here as enslaved people, as being chattel. And that's very important to understand, because we're talked about as if like our experience starts from slavery here. No, so there's a good book called Tariq as-Sudan that you can read. And it's in Arabic. I think Brill translated into history, but it's clearly talks about, and Ibn Battuta even wrote about this, how Mansa Musa's brother sent ships over here to the Americas, and that there's anthropological evidence that there were Muslims here in the Americas before Columbus got lost coming over here. Ivan Van Sertima wrote a nice book about this called They Came Before the Columbus, right? So there's so much that could be said in this answer, but I think beyond books, that a lot of this goes to hearing our stories and developing some relationships, and that's how we'll learn about different pockets of the American Muslim community. Another book called Old Islam in Detroit, written by Dr. Sally Howe. I believe that's the title of it. I have it somewhere over here. But Duse Muhammad Ali, rahmatullahi alayhi, who was a friend of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, came here in the late, around the, right before 1920. I think he first came to Detroit in 1918. He established a universal Islamic society. His mother was from Sudan. His father was from Upper Egypt, which Upper Egypt is really down here, right? It's down below, right? Eswani, he was giving dawah, and there were African Americans who were embracing the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam before the Nation of Islam. Like, there were Muslims who were black who were practicing and praying like according to the Maliki school of thought in Detroit back in the early 1920s, and some of their descendants are still around. I know one brother who's in his 80s, whose father came into Islam through that movement, right? So I'm sorry if my answer sounds disjointed. I know my sister or my brother will give a much more thorough answer than myself, but it's really about establishing relationships and hearing the stories of different African American Muslims, and then you'll be able to piece together some better, have a better idea beyond books.
Thank you for that wonderful insight. Just for the audience, Imam Dawood Walid mentioned the book Tariq al-Sudan. If you would like to if you would like to read one of these books. In addition, one thing that the Shia Muslim community that needs to realize, and we have a huge Shia audience today, alhamdulillah, is that 5 of our Imams' mothers were African. So they were all black mothers, and so they were half black, and we need to realize that. And Imam Dawood Walid mentioned in the pictures that we normally depict them as Persian or as white, with a white skin. However, we don't realize, and that's why we don't realize that they are half black, and that's something that's really important to raise awareness on. And moving on.
Let me say one thing, since you're mentioning books. Sidi Ahmed Mubarak and I wrote a book about this subject. It's called Centering Black Narrative, Ahlul Bayt, Blackness in Africa. When we talk about these imams' mothers, we talk about their physical appearance and how they look. So if you want to hear about, Brother Jihad Saleh is showing it right there. It's Centering Black Narrative, Ahlul Bayt, Blackness in Africa. You should be able to check that out.
Thank you so much for that. I will definitely write it in the chat right now. Moving on with Sister Margaret, do you have anything to add to this question? I'll repeat it one more time. What is important to know about the history of the Black community in general and the Black Muslim community specifically? And what are some resources that you recommend all of us to read or listen to?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that Black history definitely predates slavery, right? And that Islam in Africa has deeply been intertwined, and given the ways that even Orientalist tropes, which try to create those divisions, and in scholarship, like when you're looking at those big texts, whether that's on college, like they'll exclude Africa and then they'll exclude Asia, right? And even though these are like important centers of Islam, like the majority of Muslims actually exist outside of the Middle East, and so like when we think about Islam in Africa and how significant that is and how significant it is for our own history. So similarly, like whether we're going to look at West African history, and I wish I had like all the books there, but in medieval pre-modern history, in West Africa, many of those regions were like very Shia for a long time. And that's something that people don't really talk about. Like when we're thinking about the Moors in Spain, that history gets whitewashed, right? Like when we're thinking about the Amazigan communities, these communities that crossed the Sahara, right? And the history of scholarship. And so I think it's just really important for us to understand the role that Islam played in Africa and the contributions that Black Muslims have played in not just Islamic history, but global history. And that's like very significant. So there are some books, and I can also share out, you know, eventually, like I have a bibliography on race and slavery in Muslim societies, and it's outdated, but, you know, there's a lot of really good references, including, you know, like Hunwick's book of on the work of like Arabic literature in Africa. You know, so like reading, like what were scholars writing in Arabic at that time? What are some of the narratives? And so that book was really helpful for me to think about some of those encounters. And, you know, like there's a lot of great texts reading about Black Muslim scholars, you know, so the more that we can appreciate contributions of Black Muslims, the ways that they've interpreted Islam into their societies, like that provides, you know, like that provides some feedback for what we could do in the United States. A lot of people have not really looked at like some of the formation, like the work that Nana Asma'u did in educating Muslim women. So reading her book, reading her biography to see how she was instrumental in helping to solidify Islam in that region, and how even under colonialism, Islam continued to spread and solidify in West Africa. So I would start even there of looking at, you know, whether it's critiques that Muslim scholars had about oppression in those societies, and then to think about the narratives, right, of those who were kidnapped and brought to America as slaves and their struggle to be free. It gives you some insight on how deeply twisted and distorted white supremacy was, you know, for someone against their own self-interest wanted to hold Ibrahim Abdurrahman as a slave, even though the Sultan of Morocco was like, no, we will pay you any cost. And his man, like the man that owned him, that kept him unfree, refused. So getting those narratives, reading about like the Bahia revolts, reading about Black Muslim resistance is also something that's very important. Just like we read about resistance, we read about great civilizations. And part of that is like, we take pride in what the Ummah has done, what our community has done. But when you erase what a huge, you know, section of the Ummah has contributed towards the spread of Islam, and it's really what those ancestors did that we're actually embracing, right? Like we're embracing that lost history because there was that rupture through slavery, even though there were some people that they were able to maintain their Islam for generations, like within like Sapelo Island, and seeing how long did that continue. So there's, you know, obviously there's like 20th century books, like, you know, something that really helped me understand the history of Islam in America, Amina McLeod's book, African-American Islam, Understanding Race, the Experience. There was another, Jamila Karim's book on American Muslim women actually shed light on those, what happened, like the subtle dynamics to under, you know, I think it's still important to make sure that we value the stories of everyday Muslims, and that we also start to look to the intellectual contributions. And that's part of like getting to know one another, like ta'arufu, like if you're not valuing the intellectual thought, if you're not going and listening to a lecture of a Black Muslim teaching, talking about what Islam means to them, then you're not, you know, getting to know us on a deep way, but it's always being invited to somebody else's house. But, you know, people kind of afraid to go into certain spaces because they don't want to be the only one. But that may actually give you some empathy, right? Like if you're the only one in a predominantly Black space, then it's just like, welcome, marhaba, welcome to the club, because usually I'm the only Black Muslim woman in Black spaces. A lot of times I'm the only Muslim, you know, in Muslim spaces, in many, you know, outside of Black Muslim spaces, I'm the only one. So I think it's just important to, you know, kind of go outside your comfort zone, things that you may not know, like diversify your reading lists, and what you're viewing, what you're listening to, you know, and, you know, Imam Dawood Walid had a ton of books, and I would say like if you can get like a close-up of Jihad Salih Williams, like his bookshelf, if you can get those books, you'll be in good shape.
Santi, thank you so much. We are a little behind on time, so Imam Jihad, we'd love to hear from you on what you would recommend and anything we should know about the Black Muslim community or the Black community in general.
So Alhamdulillah, I mean, they said so much, you know, from Imam Dawood and Sister Margaret. I mean, they really were able to bring some stuff together. But just, I mean, Muslims were here before Columbus. You know, I mean, that's simple. We have, you know, Abu Bakr II, like we said, was related to Mansa Musa. You have Columbus while he was in Haiti. The native people told Columbus that they were trading in these gold-tipped spears. These gold-tipped spears were known for being in West Africa. Okay, so it just talking about. I mean, when we talk about Mansa Musa, who has had the greatest Hajj in history of humanity is Mansa Musa. You know, one of the mentions about Mansa Musa, he went through Egypt and he changed the value of gold because he was giving out so much gold, right? So you have to look at these very advanced civilizations, the University of Sankore Mosque, very advanced civilizations. And we see that when you have those who were enslaved, some of these were people from the ulama, you know, the Muslims who were enslaved, the Africans who were enslaved, especially those who were Muslims, they were known for their intellectual acumen, right? They were able to put together some of the most elaborate revolts. So we have Bahia, Brazil, and the Trio Rebellion, which was on where African Muslims took over entire slave ship, right? So we have these revolts because they're coming from lands where there was such an intellectual tradition that was steeped in learning, memorizing the Quran, right? The Muslims loved the Quran. One of al-Bakri, one of the great explorers, he mentions that in 11th century Ghana, he described 12 masajid, right? They had salaried imams, 11th century, right? It's a lot of my friends don't have a salary as an imam, and this is 2020. They had muezzins who were salaried, right? They had their own jurists, their own scholars. So we have this narrative in which those who were enslaved, this narrative that they deserve to be enslaved. Why? Because they're not civilization builders. They can't reach the height of you know, intellectual accomplishments. These are individuals, they're illiterate. This was the narrative. When this is a false narrative, you had Muslims, Ayyub ibn Sulaiman, he wrote the Quran from memory 3 times, right? As an enslaved African in America, wrote it from memory 3 times. Bilali Muhammad, he's writing the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd from memory, right? With his hands, all right? I'm talking about, these are our first jurists in America were these Africans who were enslaved. All right, and there's many texts on this. You have to read Sylvian Jove, her text. You have there's many. I have the books right here. I'm gonna start pulling them up and showing them right here before you all. You all read about Ibn Battuta, all right? You know, Ibn Battuta, he was amazed. Now you have things that we need to remember is that when we talk about being oppressed for over 400 years, you know, 350 years, right, of America's history is with slavery and legalized segregation. That's important to know, right? So that means 90% of America's history is either with slavery or legalized segregation, all right? And then the rest of the 50 years, the remainder of that 350 years, over 400 years now, until this day, now you have had redlining in the community where Black people weren't given a certain, they could not apply for loans, or they were given predatory loans, right? So you've had these things in the community, mass incarceration, crack cocaine in the Black American community, right? That has really infringed on the development of Black America. And lastly, I want to say that my father's uncles, my mother's, they were in the Nation of Islam representing well. In Los Angeles, you cannot forget, right? The temple number 27 in Los Angeles. Temple number 27. I've never met Ali Rashid, but I'm a product of Ali Rashid from temple number 27. And during that time, they had their own gas stations, they had their own bank, they had their own bakeries, they had their own restaurants, right? Right? They had their own independent economy. And then they said we're Muslims, right? My father was the head of the fish crew. They sold fish all around Los Angeles, and they changed the price of the fish because of the Muslims selling fish throughout Los Angeles, right? They were very proud, and they were amongst the first who now we are standing on their shoulders, and we benefit from their struggles. We benefit from them calling on Allah. They were the first over mass media to not be shameful and to say, my name is Muhammad, right? Muhammad Ali was named by Elijah Muhammad, right? So I'm from that lineage, and I'm proud. And I think when I mention these things, it's important to realize, man, Muslims have put it down right here in America, and they've done a beautiful job at giving dawah. And we have some beautiful models to look at right here in America.
Ahsant. May Allah, like that. Those are amazing examples, and especially your great father. He's truly a special person, and that is something we have to try to strive for. To get a Muslim community, especially a black Muslim community, but a Muslim community in the whole, that can control the economy, that we can use Islam as an asset instead of dividing between each other. Inshallah, we're going to move on to the next question. And that is, as a leader in the Muslim community, what has been the Muslim community's response when advocating for black issues? I want to highlight more about like how the Muslim community sometimes will say, what about Palestine? What about Yemen? What about Iraq? What about Syria? What do you have to say to that? And do you see this response as something negative, that they try to undermine the Black Lives Matter movement? And yeah, I would like to know your thoughts on that. Imam Walid, please. That is okay.
That's been a long issue and a long challenge. I remember when I first started working with CARE, and I'm gonna be very like brutally honest, but I remember when there was a bill that came in front, basically affirming the legitimacy of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right, which was legislation that came after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to try to address some of these racist pieces of law, right, such as the tests that would be made for African Americans to take a test, right, and you had to pass this test in order to vote. These like biased tests, or these ways of keeping Black people from voting, for instance. And I remember having some colleagues saying, well, you know, what does that have to do with us? You know, that's not a Muslim issue, right? But then again, at that time, I think stats were saying that the American Muslim community is about 30% Muslim. So they say, well, what does that have to do with the Muslim community, in which Muslims would be primarily affected by that, including Muslims who are Black, but also it's this weird sort of ethnocentric understanding where something that goes on in certain regions of the Muslim world, that's considered an authentic Islamic issue, right? But if it's in somewhere else where Muslims live, then that's questionable or not a Muslim enough issue. And then I think broader, it's really a type of theological misunderstanding, right? Because that the Quran and the Sunnah, there's nothing in it that says justice means just our group or justice means just us, right? So when Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Quran, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nasi ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah," you are the best nation brought for the people because you enjoin good, you forbid evil, and you believe in God. But the ayah of the Quran doesn't say that you enjoin good just for the sake of the Muslims. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he explained this, khairun nasi man yanfa'un nas, because the best of the people is the one who benefits all the people, right? So it's even this weird misunderstanding. If we understand our deen correctly, and that Allah created us to be the vicegerents in the earth, then every single issue that affects humankind and creation is a Muslim issue, right? But there's this type of disconnect. So immigration reform is a Muslim issue, but Black people getting usurped of our voting rights in certain states, then, oh, that's not a Muslim issue, right? Or I'm trying to think of another one. Some issue overseas in a particular part of the Muslim world, that's a Muslim enough issue. I'll be very specific. Okay. Bahrain is a Muslim issue. Yemen's a Muslim issue, right? But when Muslims were getting slaughtered in the Ivory Coast or the Central African Republic, you know, there weren't any special launch good campaigns for that or any special type of like PR campaigns and try to rally the Muslims to protest in front of the embassy of Central African Republic or in front of the embassy of Cote d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, right? And I could go on and on. There's many other examples I could give. I see Sister Marguerite shaking her head over there because I'm sure she could probably give even 50 more, right? But those are just like some examples.
Thank you, Imam Dawood Walid, for that beautiful answer. We, the Muslim community, should definitely realize that the issues that the Black people are facing, not only in the United States, but across the world, and every single issue is an issue that the Muslim people should advocate and advocate for justice for. And I know Sister Marguerite was speaking in one of the webinars last week with MPAC and discussing some of her efforts in addressing police brutality in the past. And some of her responses, she didn't get a good response from the Muslim community. If she would like to elaborate on this question and elaborate more on that answer.
Yeah, I mean, we've had when Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, right? And you know, I mean, nationwide, like, and so part of this is when they prioritize as far as like what's going to be an American Muslim crisis, and that there were people that said like, hey, this does not fit within this organizing space. We focus on Muslim, Arab, and South Asian. So, you know, they could still prioritize, say, like anti-Arab racism or South Asian racism. But when it came to racism that target the Black communities, or even Islamophobic incidences or violence against the Black Muslim, if they could not discern that that form of violence was directly related to, you know, like religious identity, there would be no national response, like no, you know, like, and so these were in decision making and priorities of lifting up certain cases. And that also extends to whether our political prisoners, you know, people who need advocacy, and just kind of that erasing them and removing them. So that includes whether you talk about Jamil El-Amin, or you have Black Muslim women who've had their scars removed when they've been like falsely imprisoned, and people just, you know, like they'll sue, but like they won't be the spokespeople because of the, you know, like, and some people may explain it perceived guilt, you know, like, well, they had a warrant, but it was like, well, it was a warrant for something, it was mistaken crime, like there was a messed up paperwork. So, you know, and I was like, Kirsty Powell, like, I mean, why aren't we hearing more from her experience and championing the rights of Muslim women who are incarcerated, to their privacy, to their dignity and bodily autonomy? So, you know, the ways that we respond to hate crimes against Black Muslims, like it would have to be, you know, like if someone called me the N-word, right? And like, but you would still have people kind of like, well, it was because it was race, so we as Muslims were not going to mobilize on this particular issue. And that is a problem, especially if we could still prioritize Christian Arabs who are targeted for racism, and as a community stand up with them, and that we need to be consistent in standing up for justice. Similarly, when we, you know, I mean, there's been a number of cases, police brutality, you know, Sama Rahim, there's Sharif Mobley, like who was stuck in Yemen. No one's advocating still for him, you know. So those are, you know, like real cases that we really need to educate ourselves on and understand how Black Muslims do face overlapping, like intersecting oppressions of anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, and it could be very intense. And that we as a community, if we don't mobilize to address those who are like really targeted, then we're not going to dismantle this thing that's harming all of us.
Senti, thank you so much. I want to add one more thing. There was a very big movement I remember about, or it's still going on with Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki in Nigeria. You might have heard, obviously. And once again, we look at the Muslim community and alhamdulillah, we came to our heads to advocate, but people sometimes think twice for some reason when it comes to race and not directly Islam, which is very sad. Imam Jihad, we'd love to hear from you on this question.
Bismillah. Yeah, just even really getting to know many of my Imam friends from the Desi community, from the Arab community. One thing that they have mentioned to me is that they went through, especially growing up here in America, they've went through their hip hop phase. They went through where they were on the edge of a bridge, of at least in regards to their iman and so on and so forth. Right. And these are our imams that go around teaching. Right. And I'm not going to name any names, but this goes to show you that if we do not prioritize issues that are dealing with what is taking place right here in America, when we live in America, this stuff is going to impact our mentality. It's going to come into our facilities and impact our mentality and the mentality of our children. So we have to prioritize that. I mean, for our Muslim organizations, again, I'm not going to name any names, but it's very disappointing that there's no efforts in regards to prison reform from our Muslim organizations, right? In regards to our Muslim organizations, the effort, little to no effort in regards to police brutality. And then when this occurs, okay, when you have the situation with George Floyd, now it's this co-opting of this particular issue. Now I'm about racism. Now I'm going to set up a march, right? When this has been the case for years, okay? This has been the case for years. So I think that for the most part, if we do not become a part of the conversation right now, right, what we're going to see is that this same mentality, this racism, this racial attitude towards Black people, how it has came into our masjids because we prioritize other issues over this issue that's right in our backyard that has been impacting our children. So if we don't talk about prison reform, if we don't talk about issues that plague the African-American community, it's going to come in and claim us. And I think this is what we find ourselves. For example, we're from a community that is steeped in segregation. And this is why our masajid are segregated. This is why the masjid in the hood, the roof is falling down. And the masjid in the suburban community has gold lettering with Allah's names going around them, okay? So we are directly impacted by what takes place here. So we need to begin to prioritize what takes place right here in America.
Thank you for that answer, Imam Jihad. And of course, we definitely need to prioritize the issues that the Muslims are facing in the United States to be able to impact and advocate effectively for the issues that are happening outside of the United States, which brings us to the third category and probably the most important category of today's event. So after understanding some of the experiences, some of the history that the Black Muslim community and the Black community have been facing, now it's time to address some of the practical steps that we as Muslims can do to help the Black Muslim community and the Black community as a whole. So the question is, how can the Muslim community advocate effectively for Black issues? So if you have any legislations, bills that we should advocate for, or anything that you have in mind, we would love to hear it from you. Starting with Sister Margaret.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, one of the challenges that we see is like that, you have some Muslims, and this is even during COVID, once, people saw the statistics, and they're like, well, what can we do? Let's start issuing policy. And I had told people on the national task force, it's like, well, follow the lead of Black people who've been working on those solutions, follow their leadership. You don't have to issue a new policy, just say we sign on to this, go to your community and share that, right? I think that it's actually imperative that one does the learning before, you know, like there should be actually the process of decolonizing yourself, becoming an anti-racist before you're going to try to institute new laws and policies, because you may replicate harm, sign on to things. Like, you know, people are really rushing to action because there's that discomfort. And it's like, look, my people are very resilient. You know, we've been going at this for centuries and we're still here. There's been people that have been organizing for decades on with political prisoners' rights and everything. Follow their leadership, listen and learn, take some time to do the learning. So that's the first step. And also do the work your own self, like, because coming into movement spaces or advocacy without understanding social change, without understanding the kind of cultures that may exist, you know, one, you'll just, you know, you could actually harm yourself in doing that, of being kind of not understanding where you want to, you know, apply your efforts, and it may be misguided. You know, you have to see where you fit within these spectrum of social change. Are you focusing on direct aid? Maybe your job is just to do direct aid and support humanitarian relief. Are you interested in the advocacy space? So learn a little bit more of those fields. But obviously, you know, like if Black leaders and, you know, are asking you for specific support, you know, step up. But sometimes, like, and I don't know, I mean, I'm kind of old, I may be aging myself, but Jerry Maguire, what I'm getting is a lot of people like, help me, help you. And they're just like strident, calling us. I don't know. You see the look on our face, like we're tired. And part of that is just like all these people who instantly want to help, but then they need, you know, they're like, well, explain to me where I could fit in and what I could do. And, you know, and they're coming in really hard and they're coming in really fast. And we're just like, this may be a moment, but we also need to know, are you really committed to the long-term work? You know, like, I mean, when you think about, like, I mean, I started my graduate work in 2004, you know, so this 16 years of doing kind of research and working. I've been a student, I was a student organizer since the 90s, you know, so it's like, we've been doing this for a while, and it doesn't mean like we appreciate refreshment, like being, you know, reinforcements and new folks coming in with new blood. But it's like, it's some of that introspection needs to happen, because we have a lot of Muslims kind of rushing in without understanding the issues. And it's, you know, and it could be overwhelming for a lot of leaders that are trying to do the work, and we have to like kind of pause and accommodate the kind of urgency that they have. And it's like, well, yes, it's urgent, but I also need to mourn, right? You know, because like, you know, I've lost family members to police brutality. So like, and I'm holding space for my mom who lost her only brother, right? And so it's like, I want to be on a call with my mom and not somebody's just like, no, we need to issue policy now. No, we don't need to issue a policy that may undermine the work that the people I'm accountable to.
Thank you so much, Sister Marguerite. Imam Jihad, we'd love to hear anything that we can advocate for the Black community as a Muslim community.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, alhamdulillah, first of all, I want to say that I've been overwhelmed by the response, you know, from the Muslim community. I'm not here to judge if the response is genuine. You know, for example, I mean, I have a lot of people amongst them, amongst me, Black people. They're fed up. They, you know, you have to realize that there's a lot of heartbreak. And it's, for example, I mean, it reminds me of my family. I have relatives in my family that refuse to go to the family gathering because they've canceled each other for life. And you have a lot of people in the African-American community that are saying, we don't need no more solidarity letters. This is not genuine, so on and so forth. Too little, too late. Not me. I look at how we can, you know, for example, our organization is Islah Bain al-Nas. You know, I think there's no la khayra fi kathira min najwahum إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس, right? There's no good in your secret talks, unless if it's talking about, doing good in charity or bringing people together, right? So I think that this is an opportunity, this is a window of time, and very overwhelmed with the response of the people saying, I mean, I'm getting imams coming to me saying, give me talking points. I want to understand racism. I thought I knew before, should I use this hadith? I told a group of imams, I said, we have made a lot of concessions and adjustments in the way we speak in regards to, because of feminism and also homosexuality, but also there needs to be adjustments in learning the sensitivities of the African-American community. So that, in saying that, alhamdulillah, I've seen a lot of imams, they want to learn, they want to sit down and learn what's the best way to approach it. I'm very overwhelmed and I love it. And I think there's a genuineness in my community. I love my community. We have the ride out coming on July 4th, right? Where we're going to meet at Isla LA. And we're going to ride out to some of these locations where Black men and women were gunned down. We're going to get out and make dua. And this is going to be a huge event. We also have on July 3rd, Bilal Friday, right? Bilal Friday is a day in which we want to send imams from the African-American community to be khatibs at the different masajid, right? In California. We're at least doing this in California. And we want to make sure that, as the language centering the Black voice, we want on that day, the Black voice front and center, okay? No co-opting our issues on that day. The programming belongs to the African-American community on that day, right? And it's not something that, as some of our community, let's stop begging people to love us. No, it's not about that. The pleasure of Allah lies in us building community with one another. So it compels us, like, what happened to 3 days, right? We don't do the 3-day thing no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, for us, we have to figure out how we're going to overcome this. And I'm not here to judge anyone's intention. If a masjid comes with their letter of solidarity, alhamdulillah, we're going to work on the language of the letter. We'll deal with that later. But alhamdulillah, we appreciate the effort of the Muslim community. We appreciate the people speaking out. Like Sister Marjorie said, we're overwhelmed. There's a lot of stuff going on. But alhamdulillah, we're going to get through this together. I'm hopeful and I'm happy. This is a window of time that if we don't go through this window this time, we may never get this back again. So let's work together as a Muslim community.
Thank you, Imam Jihad, for that wonderful answer. Of course, we should definitely educate ourselves and then talk to community members. And then after that, we should start making ourselves as experts and advocate for specific policies without listening to Black leaders and listening to them and adhering to their advice. So I'm interested of what you have to say, Imam Dawood Walid, on this question.
Sister Marjorie mentioned basically all that I was going to say. I do have one point of one thing that I want to put a little more emphasis. And she mentioned about, in regards to specific policies, that there's people who are in the Black community who are Muslim who are working on this and been working on these issues, and their leadership should be looked to and deferred to. But the point I want to highlight in regards to this relates to an issue of creed and an issue of comportment or adab. And this is a friendly reminder to my Muslim brothers and sisters, because I've seen some things that in Detroit, what we call out of pocket. You may not know what that means, but it's, I don't know if you know what out of pocket means, but it's out of order. Like, it's not doing things in the proper steps. So Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Quran, al-mu'minun mu'minat ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd, ya'muru ma'ruf, yawhawna 'anil munkar, wa yuqimuna as-salat, wa yutuna az-zakat, wa yuti'u Allah wa rasulahu, ulaika sayarhamuhumullah, inna Allah azizun hakim. Believing men and believing women are allies of one another. And then there are 5 things that are mentioned in the ayah that Allah Azza wa Jal gives as adjectives to describe who believers are that should be in alliance or allyship with one another. And then Allah Azza wa Jal says in a number of times in the Quran relating to this, that it is not fitting for a believer to seek allyship over a believer when there are believers present. So what is the point that I'm getting to? We are supposed to have wala, or allyship or allegiance to Allah, to his messenger, and also to the believers who are operating based upon the same framework of Iman. So it is improper, both from a creed perspective and an adab perspective, for Muslims who are non-black to think that they want to be all of a sudden woke or jump on the trends of the bandwagon and jump over their Muslim brothers and sisters who are black to seek so-called allyship, or to jump on the bandwagon of people who are black who are non-Muslims. It's not proper according to creed, and it's not proper adab. It's not right, right? And with this, I would say 2 other things. Number one, the second point is Dr. Sherman Abdul Hakim Jackson, teaches at University of Southern California. He said, "Heart work is hard work. Heart work, HEART, is hard work," right? So when we talk about these issues and we're talking about anti-black racism, or how we can incline ourselves again to that point that we defer to our brothers and sisters in Islam who are black, then there's some hard work that we have to do, right? And one of the things I also recommend for the masajid and for teachers, that we spend so much time on talking about Aqidah. And many times these days it's polemics, because the Asharis and the Sufis, they have to negate the Salafis, right? And then the Shia have to negate the Sunnah, or the Sunnis, right? All these polemics, right? And then there's political matters relating to overseas and fiqh. This is what most of our talks center around in masajid, these 3 issues. But the issue of tazkiyatun nafs, about spiritual purification, about cleansing our hearts from the most deadly spiritual disease of al-kibr. Because al-kibr, according to Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, radiallahu anhu, this is the most deadly of spiritual diseases. And this is the primary spiritual malady that informs racism, because racism is beyond just a socio-political construct. It is first informed by spiritual maladies such as al-kibr and al-hasad. There are metaphysical realities behind every physical manifestation. And I've been saying this a lot often. We shouldn't just look at things on the surface. Our Prophet said, "Likulli haqqin haqiqa." Behind every outward manifestation, there's a deeper spiritual reality behind it, right? Likulli haqqin haqiqa. So I'd like to see our Islamic centers spend more time and more discussion on how we can deal with these things that are bothering us. And then that's how we're going to make real progress, because at the end of the day, Allah Azza wa Jalla says that surely Allah will not change a people until they change what is inside of themselves, right? So sometimes we spend more time trying to fix the outside, where the real work is the heart work and inside reformation. I actually have the opinion that 75% of our effort should really be focused on that, right? And not saying that we shouldn't be involved in advocacy and things like that, because we should, but the real work is heart work. And that's my opinion, and Allah knows best.
Thank you so much for that wonderful answer, Imam Dawood Walid. And we definitely need to cleanse our hearts and souls before trying to teach others, or trying to put ourselves as experts, as Sister Margaret said. And moving on to our last question for today, before if we have time to go to a quick Q&A. This question is also mentioned by a lot of our audience, And it states, your personal activism and organizations have been long advocating for social justice issues. Can you elaborate on your past achievements and future goals? How can we, the audience, assist and support your goals and these organizations? Starting off with Imam Jihad.
Bismillah. Okay. So alhamdulillah right now, so we have, and alhamdulillah, I want to acknowledge, you know, I can't, you know, I'd be remiss without acknowledging my father and really the direction in which they instill within us. And, you know, we're a service-based community. You know, for example, I see my father was heavily involved in the 1992, you know, the riots. And I see myself, I had to learn from how he dealt with that. And, you know, he was real keen on relationship building during that point. And I'm seeing how I've been able to transfer that into my leadership. So we're standing on the shoulders of giants who came before us. Alhamdulillah, today we have Islah LA and Islah Academy. Okay, so we, my father, he was the founder in 1986 of Masjid Babullah, a service-based, you know, Islamic community. And then now we've taken it to another level to Islah LA and Islah Academy. Islah LA, alhamdulillah, we currently have a food pantry. We feed over 200 families on a weekly basis. Not only that, we have a mobile shower that comes every Saturday for the people in the community. Not only that, we also pass out cooked meals Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to the community. We take our elderly and elders in the community and the sick in the community meals. We deliver to them personally. Not only that, we have 4 homes. We have 2 homes for formerly incarcerated and also formerly homeless women. We have 2 homes dedicated to our women, and now it's occupied by many women who perhaps would have been homeless without those homes. And we have 2 homes for men, mainly formerly incarcerated Muslim men. In between them, for example, one of the brothers who is the elder in our community, he did 40 years in prison, 40 years straight, and he, as an innocent man, right? He was innocent. He did 40 years for a crime he did not commit. We have another brother who did 20 years in solitary confinement, right? So this is institutionalized racism, or systemic racism is right before you when you hear their stories, okay? So not only that, we have a LOC where when these issues come about, we make sure that we educate the Muslim community. And we have, right now we've been having online actions. For example, on Islah LA page, this is where the Muslim community, a lot of them heard about the story in more detail of Ahmaud Arbery and also George Floyd. We have actions geared around that. We have one coming up next Friday where we're bringing up the case of Breonna Taylor, and it's talking about the women who have been products of injustice. We have a full-time Muslim school in Islah Academy. Alhamdulillah, we have from K through 8 educating Muslim children, and the type of education that we're giving is it's an education that's geared towards the Muslim to be, I'm just gonna, to almost be like Malcolm, right? Where you have a balance. This is an imagination. If Malcolm continued to live and gain more knowledge even of Sharia and Quran and so on and so forth, this is our imagination. We want a culturally balanced young Muslim. Our school is 98% African American. Actually, right now I think it's 100% African American. I tried to give the 2%, but 100% African American. Young boys and girls being educated. We have a high school seminary where we teach Quran and Arabic language full-time and Sharia full-time for our young African Americans growing up in South Los Angeles. We're across the street from where Nipsey Hussle, who was in the community, we're across the street from where he was murdered, just to give you on what takes place in that particular neighborhood. With our presence in that neighborhood, they need the Muslims in that neighborhood. We need for you all, especially those who aren't in the community, by contributing to our community. It enables us to have a presence in the inner city. When you find out, my last point, when you see that there's no presence in the inner city, this is when you're going to have the degradation of and demeaning of women on hip hop. When the Muslims were in the inner city advocating on calling people to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, advocating do for self and so on and so forth, then it changed the mainstream media. So we have to continue to fund efforts such as Islah LA, which is in Islah Academy. And inshallah, just go visit our Facebook, our whatever, Twitter or social media, whatever, Instagram.
Ahsant. Truly an amazing organization, and sometimes we have to think as Muslims. We just had our Zakat al-Fitra, and we always try to, I know a lot of Arabs especially, they want to send it back home. They want to send it to Iraq. They want to send it to, there's organizations here in America, in Canada, wherever, and your Zakat al-Fitra should go to where you live. This is your home as well, and we should be trying to help the people around us first, inshallah. Sister Marguerite, we would love to hear about your organizations, your work, and past achievements.
Well, I'll try to be brief because I think that there are still some questions that left unanswered. Like if we don't answer some of those questions or deal with them, then that's just still going to break the lines of solidarity and not move us forward in creating the broad-based coalitions, right, that we need to make this country more just and address Black death, both from COVID and mass incarceration. So, I mean, yeah, my like the work that we've done in 6 years with Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative is not anywhere near comparable to the on the ground work that Islah, and you know, Islah is like a second home. Whenever I could get to South Central, like y'all see me there. Like we actually had to cancel our SoCal Muslim anti-racism training in that location. You know, like we try to do events there and do trainings and connect whenever we can. But you know, in the past 6 years, we have trained over 25,000 people on the ground and many more thousands online through doing these panels and really trying to sustain a conversation that a lot of times we would see it kind of ebb and flow or disappear and go away. So we've been the agitator both online and a kind of PR nightmare for even some of the groups that we work with. And many of the ways of like our approach of really trying to incorporate prophetic communication, you know, thinking about adab and akhlaq, like how do we call in people? How do we talk to them? Like, it's not just issue a letter, hold them accountable, but, you know, like really have not just a conversation, but the more that we can educate people on these perspectives, then we can come to some either mutual understanding and go our different ways through our strategies, or we can like work together and collaborate. So, you know, we have tracks of curriculum that really are based on Islamic standards, right? Like our values of a positive self-identity, appreciation for diversity, intercultural dialogue, allyship, and standing for justice, and really implementing this work and educating each other. So from those 5 tracks, it goes from the range of doing our K through 12, all from Adam. So that's like where kind of like our early start of developing those curriculum standards through the depths of knowledge. And as an educator, that's something that's like really close to home. And I know for some people that may not be their jam, but as an educator, thinking about how do we inculcate Islamic knowledge in ways that change our behavior has been something that's very important to me. And that also includes whether we're going to try to incorporate nonviolent communication in addition to nonviolent action, and thinking about what does that mean in mass movements. And we are on this we are right now in the middle of a mass movement, and what is going to be our place as a community of faith. Right now you have clergy that are standing up. I was asked on Monday, you know, to come in and lead a prayer at a Black Lives Matter and you know, it was a Black Lives Matter protest and clergy and laity united for economic justice. And we did not have an imam there. And it was, you know, like the irony was like, I don't consider myself clergy, but I was asked to present, you know, a short section, prepare a section of a talk about these issues at a khutbah at the Islamic Center in Southern California. So I don't see myself leading devotional life, but having to maintain this kind of discussion from a faith-based perspective and provide those talking tools and to support and kind of cultivate spaces to advance discussions. And yeah, like there's advocacy work, the work of Detroit, like the CARE Detroit chapter has been absolutely essential. And so what our work is really trying to weave a network of anti-racists. And so we do have over 200 members, and we've just connected thousands of people. And so it's hard for me to like say like this is what we've accomplished directly. Similarly with the show that's coming out tomorrow. So like I'm really proud of East La Brea, which came out of an idea. Like I wanted to do some storytelling, and I had that one idea, but hundreds of people worked on that thing. And it's not something that any one of us can claim, but it's what we all did together that makes that important. So I do think in this moment, I'm deeply humbled and proud that Muslim art can play a role in these conversations and to sustain it and to lift up the many hundreds of leaders that we know. So I don't know if that like answers the question, but I still feel very blessed to be able to do this work through these difficult times.
Thank you so much, Sister Marguerite. Muslim Arc is an amazing organization, and inshallah, we can also join and help in your guys' initiatives. Last but not least, Imam Dawood Walid, we would love to have you elaborate on the organizations you work with, CARE, and everything you do as in your personal life.
I just try to be very succinct. And you mentioned CARE, and I can't get into the specifics, but there is going to be a national initiative that's going to be announced from CARE soon. But in saying that, CARE Michigan, we've been working on police accountability issues relating to law enforcement, brutality issues, long before it became in vogue in the Muslim community. And in fact, long before my national office and other chapters even thought it was cool. And probably the reason is that because I'm the Obama of CARE, meaning that I'm the first Black executive director of any CARE chapter. And right now I'm still the only African-American executive director of CARE, of any CARE chapter, now that Brother Edwards moved as deputy director in DC. We do have a Sudanese sister, Lubaba, who's director now at CARE Houston. And we also have Brother Jelani Hussein, who is Somali background in Minneapolis. But we've been dealing with these issues for a while. And one of those that we're dealing with right now is trying to work on repealing and getting done away, removed in Detroit, what's called the green light surveillance cameras. And unfortunately, many Muslim businesses have been owned businesses, Arab American businesses have been in cahoots with the Detroit Police Department in regards to having these green lights that basically mass surveil communities. And these green lights that are on some of these businesses are even pointed in the direction of masajid that can literally surveil who's coming in masajid. So this is an issue that we're working on, including in the Warrendale area of Detroit, where there are a lot of Iraqi Americans who are Muslims who live in that area. It's one of the poorest zip codes in Michigan, actually has a lot of Iraqi American immigrants that live in that area. So we've been working on that. As far as how to help, where I would say do research and look in supporting some cause in your locality, right? It doesn't have to be given to a national organization. Actually, there are many grassroots organizations that are doing a lot of impact working on various, not only advocacy issues, but giving direct services. So I'll just lift up one that doesn't live, it's not in my state, in my locality. I was really impressed when I visited them about a few weeks before the COVID lockdown. I was invited to lecture in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the Islamic Center there for a program. And I went to this place called the Mahroof Center. the Mahroof Center, is in the poorest neighborhood in zip code. It's in the poorest zip code in the entire state of Wisconsin. So if it's the poorest zip code in the entire state of Wisconsin, you know how the people look. They're Black, right? So the Mahroof Center is there. Down the street is the Dawah Center. Then you have the Mahroof Center. They have intervention in dealing with at-risk youth. They have after-school literacy program and tutoring. They have a couple of Muslim brothers there who are martial arts experts who are doing martial arts training. They have some sessions for brothers only. Then they also have something for sisters there. And this is a Black-led organization. It's called the Mahroof Center. They're doing, mashallah, it's like a gym in that area. And also, let me tell you that this is in itself is a source of dawah, because about half of the kids that go to Mahroof Center are not Muslim. So you have about a quarter of the kids are African-American Muslim kids, meaning descendants of the enslaved Africans. Then you have the other quarter who are kids of immigrants that come from West Africa, right? Like Ghana and countries in West Nigeria. And then you have the other portion of those, the half are at-risk African-American youth who are not Muslim. So look them up, the Mahroof Center in Milwaukee. They're doing some, yes, it's in the hood, right? So look them up because they're doing fabulous work, and think about giving them some of your sadaqah.
Thank you, Imam Dawood Walid, for this, for illustrating some of your work and some of the work that CARE does, and the center that you, the Mahroof Center that you talked about, and I encourage all of us to donate and support. If you can't donate, you can simply repost one of the posts that Muslim Arc, Islah Alay, CARE, or any of these organizations that post on Instagram, and just spread awareness. There's a lot that we can do as individuals, and we should all do that as much as we can.
Okay. There was someone in the chat that also added Believers Bailout. They're also an amazing organization that is helping with the criminal justice reform and helping out with police brutality and all of that. And that was something that was mentioned, and it's an amazing organization as well.
Yeah, support Believers Bailout.
Yeah.
You heard it from the Imam. Support Believers Bailout. We have to support Believers Bailout because it's, and other organizations that are really trying to help society and trying to make change. And we can do that by donating, by supporting, by reposting, and all of these things that we can do as individuals. We only have 7 minutes left, so we will. I would like to ask Margaret Hill, Sister Margaret Hill, Imam Jihad, and Imam Dawood for any lasting thoughts that they have for the future, for the audience. Starting with Sister Margaret.
Yeah, so I mean, we are on a precipice of something that's really, I mean, this is an unprecedented time, and this is going to be a long, difficult summer, and people are re-envisioning this society and rethinking institutions that have been harmful. And we've seen like some of the kind of gatekeeper, like some of the big organizations that had internalized a lot of the white supremacy, like that had spent a lot of time being very close with law enforcement, rethink their own relationships. And so there's a great amount of promise that we can have if we continue to push these discussions and to hold each other into account of standing for justice so that we don't backslide. So I have a lot of hope that, you know, we have a growing awareness, growing abolitionist movement of we can rethink, you know, like what does justice look like? What does being in community look like? And that we as a community of Muslims, we can also think, just get back to like, I mean, I'm a Muslim of the 90s, so we were rethinking economics and mutual aid and finance and everything. And right now, like as we are in this great upheaval in this moment of addressing systemic racism, anti-Black racism, that we do put the money, like our money where our mouth is, and that we start to invest in institutions and businesses and things that are going to turn our communities around, our neighborhood around, and this country around.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Sister Margaret. Imam Jihad, do you have anything, any last remarks to add before we conclude, inshallah?
Alhamdulillah. I just want to thank you all for the opportunity, to serve today. Brother Mahdi and Brother Muhammad, you all keep going. These are teachable moments, and I think that you all are gaining so much valuable experience in what you're doing. So keep going forward. You are going to be the target of like my father, he tells me, he says, a leader, he says, as an imam, you're a target for insanity, right? So this is one of his sayings. So you all are going to be targeted by criticism from, perhaps people around you. Keep going. You all are going to find a deep insecurity even within yourself. Face it, keep going. You're going to find moments where you feel like you're drowning in your leadership. Keep going. So I want to just motivate you all, and I'm sure I don't see any sisters too much, but I'm sure there's sisters that work with you all. And I would say the young people, y'all keep going, have respect for the elders around you, but keep going. My dua that I've been making, this is from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He mentioned a beautiful dua. And then this is in regards to our behavior towards one another. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the most empathetic human being to ever walk the face of this earth, having the most compassion, the most mercy towards others. When we think about his dua, he mentions in the beautiful dua, Allahumma fa'ayyuma mu'minin sababtuh faj'al dhalika lahu qurbatan ilayka yawm al-qiyamah. A beautiful dua. He says, oh Allah, if I shall ever abuse another believer, please let that be a means of bringing him near to you on the day of resurrection. And this is a beautiful dua. If I ever abuse someone else, another Muslim, another believer, let that be a means of bringing that person close. A lot of times we abuse each other, and we also want to abuse them, and we want them far from Allah, right? But here the Prophet ﷺ, he wanting the best for the believers amongst them. We should be like that. Let us want the best for each other. Let us want the best for each other. But other than that, keep going. Don't stop. Keep it going.
Thank you so much for these kind words, Imam. It truly means a lot. Imam Dawood, if you have anything to share before the end of this event.
Yeah, just as a friendly reminder, as we deal with the broader society, and even within our community, that the message of Islam is a message of redemption. And we as Muslims, we don't wholesale cancel groups of people. No group is beyond redemption, and no group is beyond Allah's mercy. The Prophet ﷺ did not cancel those who threw stones at him at Ta'if. He didn't cancel Quraysh even after they martyred Hamza ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi at Uhud. He never canceled those people. In fact, he didn't even make dua against them, right? So we have to be, in our pain and in our moving forward as a community, we have to make sure not to do what I've coined the term of socio-political takfir. We don't takfir someone outside of the deen, but we takfir them that they're beyond redemption or we've canceled them. So we have to give space for each other as believers. We've made mistakes. Some of us did things incorrectly without malicious intent. Some of us maybe had done some things with kibr in our hearts, acting from a way of jahil, but we have to resolve ourselves in trying to do better. And for those of us who have been harmed, we also have to open up our hearts, and as the Prophet did, and be able to give people space and pardon people, that people actually can get it and people actually can do better. And I also conclude with this, that in the Quran, this phrase, aqrabul taqwa, is only mentioned 2 times in the Quran, of what is most close to at-taqwa, or proper regardfulness and God consciousness. One relates to justice, but the other one relates to pardoning, right? So pardoning and justice. So this is the balance that we have, right, between the Jalali and the Jamali, right? That we seek justice, but also we have to have it in our means to pardon people, even when people have done wrong, to be able to give them that space so that we can move forward as a society and move forward as a community. So aqrabul taqwa, right? This is what Allah Azza wa Jal says. And please pardon me, and may Almighty Allah bless you, Sayyid Muhammad Sadiq, bless you, Sayyid Muhammad Mahdi, all the organizers. May Allah continue to protect our sisters and our brothers working at Muslim Ark. May Allah bless our beloved brother, Jihad Sofia, who's becoming a superstar in the Muslim community. And I'm not saying it to blow your head up, but yeah, because when you become a superstar, you're gonna get arrows pointed at you too. People are gonna start gunning at you. So we ask Almighty Allah to protect you.
We got you though.
Nasnullah al-afiyah, Nasnullah al-afiyah. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to give us all the afiyah in our deen, in the dunya, and in the akhirah.
Thank you so much, Imam. I'd like to give the floor to Imam Jihad Saleh if he'd like anything, out of respect for him. I know he's been here listening with his contagious energy. So if he'd like to add anything before we end off with the program, we'd love to hear from him really quickly.
Assalamu alaikum. These were all my teachers. I co-sign on everything they said.
Ahsan. Thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you everyone, to our dear speakers. Firstly, I hope this humble program presented by the speakers was as effective and beneficial for you all as it was for me personally, and I'm sure it was for you all. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your time and your knowledge, and inshallah, the Muslim community as a whole takes more initiative in becoming the perfect allies to our Black community. And that serves for a reminder for myself first and foremost. It is my hope that we can continue these dialogues and continue to learn from your expertise in the future. Thank you, Imam Safir. Thank you, Sister Margaret Hill. And thank you, Imam Walid, so much. I'd also like to express my gratitude to the youth organizations who contributed towards this program in any way, including Muslim Youth Connection, Ummah, IECOC, Mount Sac MSA, and Muslim Youth in Motion. I don't want to forget the many organizations and people that also helped in sharing this program and getting our poster all over social media. So once again, thank you so much. My last thank you is to all the wonderful attendees, for this program was made solely for the community's benefit, and inshallah you leave with that sentiment. We thank you so much for your constant support and your efforts in striving to become a more welcoming Muslim community, and your presence in this webinar proves that effort itself. Our final hope is the objective we began with was met, and we as a Muslim community start compensating for the lack of allyship we have been providing. And inshallah, that is something that we will be working on vigilantly. I'd like to end with the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha for all those who have been martyred in cold blood due to oppression, racism, and tyranny all around the world. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin, iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayra al-maghdubi alayhim, wala ad-dallin, sadaqa Allah al-aliyyil azim. Thank you all, wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.